Thank you very much. Hi, welcome everyone. Hope you're enjoying SynthFest UK 2024. I know I am. Welcome to my talk on the history of the drum machine as told through these 5 iconic drum machines we have here on stage. My name's Ollie Freak. I'm the author of Synth Evolution, a hand-illustrated book on the history of synthesizers, drum machines and samplers, and some of my illustrations are actually on the backdrop here, which is quite cool. And it is available from the stall upstairs, so you know what to do. And this is Michael Eden, who is a musician, typographer, and drum machine collector, who has been kind enough to bring 5 of his amazing machines along with us today. Some say he can spot a typeface from 500 yards and a bossa nova from 50. We shall put that to the test. So, let's start with something obvious. What is a drum machine? I know you all know, but just for the sake of argument, I would say it's an electronic musical instrument that replicates the sound of acoustic drums and percussion and organizes those sounds into rhythms and beats for musicians to play along with or to use in recordings. Now, I think it's worth noting that while we're talking about replicating drums, the drum kit itself, which is the usual set of drums that you'll find in most drum machines, actually originated in New Orleans in the 1920s, in the jazz scene there. And I've included a picture here of Gene Krupa, who a modern drummer called the father of modern drumming, because you'll notice he's standing at his drum kit, and that meant he had to kick his bass drum, which is why we call a bass drum a kick drum very often. So that was quite a fun fact I thought we could kick off with. So, oh, I didn't even mean to do that, sorry. I'm going to cover some key themes and throughout this talk, using these 5 wonderful machines. And actually, we're spanning quite a short period, but a lot happened over this time frame from 1960 to 1980. And the themes I'm going to cover are the connection to dance music. Now, obviously, something like the 808, yeah, we know dance music. But I think it is worth noting that these earliest drum machines, like the Wurlitzer here, had dance music programmed into them. They happen to have Latin and ballroom, but they're still dance rhythms, the bossa nova, the cha-cha-cha, etc. So that connection to rhythm and dancing and drum machines was there right from the start. But I think what changed over time is the users of these machines. The earliest ones were aimed at the home organist, who would play at home and also in public, and that evolved into professional musicians, as it were, studio use and in commercial recordings. Another key theme is how the earliest ones came with lots of presets, and by 1980 it was possible to program your own beats into. And finally, I think this is a really key one, these earlier machines replicated the sound of current dance music, but by 1980 they were used as the foundation of brand new electronic music, and I think that's where we get really excited, because we want to make new music with these things, and these 5 machines tell that story, and also the technology that facilitated that. So we go from valve technology via transistors to miniaturized transistors in the form of microchips, which enabled the creation of software, after which anything is possible. So without any further ado, because we have some great machines here, let's start by talking about the Wurlitzer Sideman. Now for me, I believe this is the first drum machine from 1959, because it replicates the sound of drums, we've mentioned, that's quite important, and it plays back rhythms. Some people mention earlier machines, like the Chamberlin Rhythmate from 1949, which did play back the sound of drums, but it was just tape loops. It was a real drummer recorded on tape loops and played back, and all you could really do was change the tempo. So it's great, a very interesting instrument, obviously, and led on to the mellotron in the following decades, but I wouldn't say as a true drum machine. Some people go back even earlier to the Theremin Rhythmicon of the 1930s. And again, this is a fascinating electronic instrument and shows what people were just trying to do with the technology at their disposal. But it's very much a sort of exploration of harmonics and polymeter and polyrhythm. Very definitely wasn't trying to replicate the sound of drums, and I don't think anyone was trying to dance to it. So I don't think that counts as a true drum machine. Whereas the Wurlitzer Sideman, I think definitely is. So Michael, give us a demo.
So, Wurlitzer Sideman, what can you say about a contraption like this? It's absolutely genius. Let's start at the start. This lever on the top, can we all see that? Turns the machine on, sets the tempo. Most important lever on the machine, really. I'm going to show you a camera angle from behind just to show you how the motor works and engages that rhythm generator. Oh, there it is, there it is. You've heard it a bit too soon. But first, let's hear the sounds. Bass drum. 2 tom-toms. 2 temple blocks. The wood block, that serves as the metronome as well. The clave, the maracas, the brush, and the cymbal. Now, the astute among you might realise they're exactly the same sound. Bit of a cheat, really. It's got 10 sounds, but really it's only 8. And they're made round the back here by 4 dual triode 12AX7 valves. Very common valve in a power amp. Dual triode do 2 sounds at once. Let's have a look at some rhythms. Well, let's start with this familiar one. It's a bolero. We've got some other standards like the waltz. Not the most interesting. Interesting ones like the western. Bit of a drunk horse. Now it seems like this is a bit of a common theme with drum machines. They reflect the common culture. So in the 50s and the 60s, this was built in 59, westerns were a key part of popular culture in America where this was made. Round the other side, we have all the Latins. Cha-cha-cha, samba. We don't, unfortunately, have a bossa nova. And that's because the bossa nova, as a derivation from the samba, didn't appear until 1959. This is a 1959 drum machine, so there was no time to put it on here. I think they would have otherwise. Down the bottom, one of the most important things, the foxtrot. It must have been a really common dance at the time, because you've got 72 variations you can make. From the 2-beat to the 4-beat, let me just show you the difference there. Or 4 on the floor. So a little nod maybe to a little anticipation of programmability in the future, in that the organist could dial in as much or as little of a block or a cymbal as he wanted. And one fun thing, if you dial it up really quickly, gets a bit like techno. That's the Wurlitzer Sideman. Oh, I didn't show you the mechanism. Do you want to see the mechanism?
Yeah, we've got.
Are we seeing the mechanism?
Definitely.
Sorry. Taking the time up.
We've got 65 years of drum machine history to fit into 1 hour. It's quite the challenge.
It is. So, you turn it on. The motor powers this band, which powers this wheel, which moves that cog, which moves this little wheel, and engages it with a big disc. And the big disc turns the comb against the solder points that you see on the front. And that's where the rhythms come from. To speed it up, all it really does is move the little wheel closer to the middle of the big disc, and therefore turns it faster. And round the front, let me show you that for those that can't see. There it is in all its glory. That's a cone constantly sweeping past all the solder points, which are then connected to wires, which are loomed up and come round here and underneath and connect to an extraordinary 24-pole switch. And those rhythms that I showed you are selecting different layers of that 24-pole switch and engaging different drum beats, as shown here. 4/4 beats on the outside, slightly more on the outside 2 rows, and on the inside rows, slightly less, 3/4 beats. That's about that.
That's lovely. Thanks very much, Michael.
You're welcome.
You're good. Yeah, lovely. So it's just lovely to see 65-year-old drum machine in person here. So That's great. Thanks, Michael. So one of these themes, who is using these machines? Well, it's home organist. We can see a very happy home organist here with his sideman there playing nicely. But they're also using public performance. It wasn't just the sort of friends and family in your sitting room sort of thing. It was also used in public places, as the ad on the right-hand side shows. But, oh no, what happens? Someone invents an electronic musical instrument aimed at dance music, and it's immediately banned, or at least the American Federation of Musicians tried to have it banned. When it's released. Now, it's a bit more understandable, as Michael mentioned to me. The phrase sideman in America at the time really translates as session musician. So really what Wurlitzer had done was release a Wurlitzer session musician, which obviously would make the unions a bit worried that their members might lose out on income because of this new device. So, yeah, understandably, perhaps they tried to counteract that. They didn't succeed in banning it outright, but they did manage to ban it for use in public places where people dance to. So here we are, 1959, drum machines, dancing in public, moral panic, or perhaps financial panic, but it's right there, right from the start. You've got to love it. Now, a word on the humble home organists. I think they get a bit of a bad reputation amongst us, professional synth enthusiasts. We look down upon their slightly cheesy activities. But I think, to be fair to them, the 1950s was a time of cool jazz and Latin and rock and roll. These were not cheesy music styles, and I think anyone who wants to play them at home, fair play. Just a little word of defense there for the home organist. Right, let's move on to our second drum machine. This is the KO Donkomatic DE11 from 1966. Now, this represents the theme of technological change. As Michael showed, this has the sideman has valves in it, but by the 1960s, transistors were coming in, replacing those rather cumbersome, overheating, unreliable electronic switches, and transistors obviously enabled the miniaturization of consumer devices from that point, from the early to mid-60s, and electronic instruments were no exception. So, for me, although the KO Donkomatic D11 is not the first of the transistor-based machines. It certainly represents that first generation. The very first one was the Acetone FR1, which we'll mention in a minute. But yeah, that is what we have this machine on stage for. Now, KO were quite an interesting company. They were formed in the early 60s by Tadashi Osano and Tsutomi Kato. Osano was actually playing accordion in one of Kato's Tokyo clubs and used a sideman to accompany him, and he thought it frankly wasn't up to the task and he could do a better job. So he approached Kato, ever the entrepreneur, and said, why don't we make a better one? And Kato said, yeah, all right, let's do it. So that is in fact what they did, forming the company KO. We'll come back to Fumio Maeda in a minute. And their first machine was the DA20, and I love these literal translations from the Japanese, the Donkomatic Disc Rotary Electro Auto Rhythm Machine. Snappy. Worth noting though, possibly Donkomatic being a sort of onomatopoeic donka kind of choice. The first instance of putting a donk on it. Sorry. Yay. But it's very clearly a clone of the sideman. It has valves, it has a mechanical rotary wheel. Actually, I should go back. The top there, you can trigger the individual drum sounds using a keyboard, which is a bit odd, but that's what you could do. They even were inspired, shall we say, by the typeface of the Wurlitzer sideman, as you can see there. Although I note the Chamberlain Rhythmate from earlier also used the same typeface, so perhaps that was just in the air or what the tin metal plate printers had available. But let's look at the D11, the transistor, one of their early transistor machines. We shall come to Michael to hear this machine live.
Right, so the first transistor machine, it's a bit smaller. It doesn't need to be so big because transistors are little. Still got a speaker, still got an amp, still very much for sitting next to rather than plumbing into the rest of your system. It's a little bit poorly, this one, so I can't give you the bossa nova. I know you're disappointed, but here's one we can do. It's a rocker ballad. Are you getting that? Ah.
Banging.
There's a couple of others that seem to work okay. That, believe it or not, is a March polka. Here's a foxtrot. Only has one controllability on it. That's to lose the sound of the cymbal or add it back in. Not the most inspiring drum machine, not the best sounds, but it's here even though it's ill. just to say, hey, we've moved on from valves, we've moved to transistors, and the future of solid state is now with us.
Great, thanks, Michael. So, yeah, this was one of their earlier transistor machines, but KO went on to make drum machines pretty much for the best part of a decade, and they only made drum machines, and again, they're very clearly focused at the home organist market. Oh, can we have the slide change? This is a list of their machines that they made over that time, and you can see that they licensed and sold their drum machines to a whole range of organ manufacturers, so very clearly that connection is there. But they didn't remain being called Korg forever, because you remember Fumio Maeda from our first picture. He approached Kato, ever the entrepreneur, with the idea of releasing an electric organ, which he did. And at the same time, they changed the name to Korg, which I think we may have heard of. So some of you may know that backstory, but it's nice to have Korg in this building, and this is their origin story, and I'm happy to share it with you. The word Korg possibly being initials of Kato and Asonai, possibly KO Organ Company. Either way, what's interesting about the electric organ that Maeda brought to Kato is that it is actually using true synth circuits for its tone generation. It's not the sort of divide-down transistor-based circuits of other contemporary home organs. It's not a tone wheel. It's actually a synth, which therefore isn't a big surprise, perhaps, that a couple of years later they went on to release their first synth, the Mini Korg 700, in 1973. Now, KO aren't the only world-beating synthesizer and pro audio manufacturer that got their start in the early 60s building transistorized drum machines. No. Acetone were another one. And they actually did make the first transistorized drum machine, the FR1, as you can see here. They also, over this time, made electric organs and amps and other equipment. But like KO, in a very weird parallel sort of life story, they also changed their name, or rather Ikutaru Kakahashi, who founded Acetone, left Acetone to found Roland. And they also released their first synth in 1973, the Roland SH1000. And like the electric organs and Mini Korg that we just saw, these are still very clearly aimed at the home organist. They have a front panel, easy access switches for when it's sitting on top of your larger organ in the front room there. So yeah, I just find it fascinating that Korg and Roland have these very similar origin stories. Okay, so we're now going to move on to our third drum machine, the KO Mini Pop 7. So we're sticking with KO. And this came out only a year after the Donkomatic there, and now you're actually seeing the miniaturization afforded by transistors. Now they're not building great big speakers into it as well. But I'm going to make the case that this is the earliest widely heard drum machine. We'll get to why in a moment, but I think first we should have a little listen to the Mini Pop 7.
Listen. You see that?
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the Mini Pop 7. 20 rhythms, quite a lot of rhythms, arranged in two banks, the A bank and the B bank, if you like. More controllability now than the Donkomatic. We've got individual controls for some of the percussion sounds, tambourine, guiro, quijada. And we've got a little bit of balance control. We can go from lower sounding rhythms to brighter sounding rhythms. That's about it, but it's still a lovely machine. It's one of my favorites. Let's switch it on. You might hear the faint sound of a capacitor sighing as it gets ready for work. Ah, not if I don't put it on, you won't. There it is. Isn't that beautiful? And that's the Mini Pop 7.
Thank you, Michael.
So let's have a pattern. I'm going to start on the A bank, and I'm going to start with the bossa nova. There we go.
Yes.
Let's put a bit of tambourine in. Let's put a bit of guiro in.
Nice.
Anyone for quijada? Now that's a cool beat, regardless. That's a cool beat, but now on these machines, in much the same way as the Western appears on the Sideman, and even a beat called Team Beat appears on the Donkomatic, that was released in '66. Team Beat, Liverpool. The Beatles toured Japan in '66. That seems to be a reflection of popular culture and the advancement of that. Now we have the rocks, they're standard. So this is rock 1, rock 2, rock 3. Get a little bit more complicated as we go up. And rock 4. One of the other important things that you could do though, now you've got buttons, you can muck about a bit. You can press more than one in. So what about a rock and a bossa nova? Sounds pretty good to me. What about a swing and a rock? That's pretty funky. What about slow rock and begin? Now some of you might recognise that. I'm going to let Ollie tell you why.
Cool. Thank you, Michael. I actually think this one of the earliest drum machines to actually have a real character of its own. I mean, it just sounds great, even to this day. So yes, back to why I am claiming it's the first widely heard drum machine, and that is because, as I'm sure a lot of you know, it was used extensively by Jean-Michel Jarre on Oxygen and Equinox in the 1970s. And of course, by virtue of using it and selling millions of records, a lot of people heard that. Heard the mini pops as a result. So I think what we should do is have a listen to Oxygen 4. Some of you may not have heard it. I don't know if you're familiar with that song. But pay attention to the beat, and we'll talk about it afterwards. Cool. And if you can't play Oxygen 4 at Synthfest UK, I don't know where you can. So just remind us of what that sounds like, Michael, because the last beat he played was, in fact, what Jarre used. There we go. That's Oxygen 4.
Probably about that tempo.
A little bit faster. There you go. Cool. So we used that beat on part 2 of Oxygen as well. And as mentioned, as we've just heard, it's Rock 1 and Beguine combined. Now, he also used the mini pops on Oxygen part 6. But how did he create the wonderful rhythm of Oxygen 6? I will play you Oxygen 6, a snippet, for reference. So let's have a quick listen to this. I think we can just about hear the mini pops under the waves of EMS VCS3 white noise, thanks Jarre. Michael, how did Jarre do that? We need to swap the camera.
He's a clever guy, Jarre. He's really applied himself here. He's taken the Oxygen 4 and he's done that.
Ta-da!
Beautiful.
Wonderful. So genius or laziness, you decide. But it's lovely, a lovely fact. Thanks, Michael. So we've been looking at the sounds on the Chiada, on the Mini Pop 7, and we've mentioned this drum, Chiada. How many people here know what a Chiada actually is, just out of interest, the real thing? Cool. Neither did I until recently. Let's have a listen to what it sounds like played acoustically. And I do think it's something. So that sounds pretty cool. And I do think it's one of the sounds that gives the mini pops, its real character. A one-shot version of that sound is a bit like a vibroslap, but no. It is, of course, a donkey jawbone that has been cleaned of tissue so the teeth can rattle in the sockets. Obviously. Why Korg, or KO as they were then, wanted to include that instrument on the mini pops is unclear, except that there is a connection between Japan and Peru, late 19th century migration and this kind of stuff, so perhaps that was how they came across it. But it's sort of fascinating to reflect on why they picked it. I think we should have a quick listen to, what do I do now? I think I play the one shot. And the mini pops is a replication. Yeah, you see where they were going with that. I think it's fair enough. Cool. So, although the Mini Pop 7 is one of the earliest widely heard drum machines, because it was released in '67, though not widely heard till the '70s, I think there were some other records which featured the drum machine before then that were widely heard. So let's just have a little listen to some first big hits featuring drum machines. So we've got future Bee Gee, Robin Gibb, writing a song called Saved by the Bell in 1969. And his hit Saved by the Bell reached number 2 in 1969. Let's have a quick listen. Bit of a tearjerker, thanks Robin. I'm pretty sure it is an Acetone FR1 because he performed this song on a West German show called Beat Club, and they helpfully filmed it in the studio. And look, that's definitely an Acetone. There you go. Fact. Nice to do a bit of research. Slightly cooler, only a couple of years later, was Sly and the Family Stone with a genuine global hit that still sounds great to this day. Family Affair featuring the Maestro MRK2. To this day. So I think the interesting thing, these earlier songs were kind of grafting the drum machine into existing musical formats as sort of extra possibly novelty, but giving a different sound world to their recordings, whereas I think Jar's use of the Mini Pop 7 and that whole 70s sort of synthy space music movement were beginning to use electronic instruments to make new genres that reflected the qualities of the electronic instruments themselves. So again, I think that's why Jar's use of the Mini Pop 7 is pretty significant. Cool, so now we move to our next drum machine. Now this is the theme of, even Jar had to work with presets on his album, and a great job he did with it too, as we saw with his A-B switch. But what a creative musician really wants to be able to do is program their own beats into it. So the Paya programmable drum set is the first commercially available programmable drum machine. So it's not the very first programmable drum machine. There were earlier ones like the Eco Compute Rhythm from 1971, which is a pretty cool looking thing. It actually introduces that sort of XOX 16-step programming paradigm that we see later on the 808. But I think it's fair to say it didn't have a huge impact on global musical culture. It had more of an impact on Italian B-movies because it had some cool blinking lights that looked like a spaceship. So, you know, that's cool. But even Jar wasn't immune to the charms of the Compute Rhythm because he uses it in the official video for Oxygen 4, which is kind of interesting because we've just heard it's the Mini Pop 7. It's not that. But Jar's not immune to a pretty blinking light show, I think, we know. And it's possible he used it as a trigger for other rhythms rather than a sound source in itself. But back to the programmable drum set. So this was released in 1975. It came in kit form. Paya made other kit form synthesizers at the era. And as you can see, it's quite a straightforward, almost simple, shall we say, machine. There's only a few sounds. There's not a lot you can do with them. And not a lot of flexibility. But what it does have is this word, program. So that's its innovation, I think important for that reason. So Michael, talk us through the Paya, please.
So here we have it. The lesser spotted Paya programmable drum set. As Ollie says, truly lesser spotted, I think, because they were kit forms. You built them yourself, and I think, as a result, very few survive, certainly in decent condition. Let's switch her on, have a little listen to the sound. You might hear a capacitor sighing as it gets ready to work. There it is. A little bit more violent, this machine. Simple machine, but really advanced for its time. You've got 2 programs. You've also got a bridge for each program. So you've got some controllability about making a song up. You can save it if you have decent enough battery strength. Let's have a listen to the sound, shall we? We've got a bass drum. Of course you've got a bass drum. We've got accent bass. Now that's a really nice touch. That's something we see on later Roland machines. The ability to add a little bit more to your 1 beat or your 3 beat. So from there we go to a tom, a conga, a wood block, a clave, and then last but not least, we've got the snare. Now the tom and the snare. So basically, they're not the most inspiring sounds, let's face it, but you've got a mixture of boop and a little added smidgen of pff. I don't think we need to tell them where the white noise comes from.
I'm pretty sure everyone knows how the Paya programmable drum set generated its white noise.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's the avalanching reverse bias based emitter of a transistor, isn't it?
I might need to look that up, but essentially, it's an avalanching reverse biased.
That's how they did it, anyway.
Like
right, let's program something, because in 1975, despite the sounds, this is the exciting thing about this drum machine. You get it out of the box, and you can program a beat that you haven't got anywhere else. So let's do that. We hit reset. Everything starts with reset. We hit program. Now, suffice to say, this is step program. It's the simplest program of all. It's not as complicated as XOX on the 808. It's not as complicated as your grids on your doors. Every measure is as important as the last, whether or not it's got a drum beat on it. So you've got to be able to program your rests, and that's why there's a rest button. I'm going to program a simple bossa nova, I think, because that's my favourite. I can't do it and speak at the same time because of my tiny brain, so bear with me just a mo.
While you do that, I've just noticed. No, you carry on. They put the rest and the reset buttons right next to each other, which is just surely a recipe for disaster.
Almost, yeah. So here we go. Simple beat. I think I've got it wrong, Ollie. I'm going to reset. I'm going to start again.
Professionals, we're gonna do this right.
Here we go. That's it. That's my beat. That's what I want. I hit repeat. That gives it a marker at the end, somewhere to cycle. That could be anywhere. You could put any number of beats in. So it can actually do complex time signatures, which is remarkable. That beat sounds a little like this. All right, it's not a bossa nova.
Well, you tricked us.
But there is a reason why we programmed that beat. Ollie's going to tell you about that.
Cool. Thanks. Michael, do you want to pop the...
Oh, yes, sorry.
So it's a fairly simple machine in terms of its sounds and what you can do with it, but you could program it. So it didn't necessarily make a huge splash in the sort of music sense culturally at the time, but it did have its fans, and one of those was Peter Gabriel, who we know used it for the demos of his seminal 1980 album 3. And unfortunately, not many of the songs featured the Paya in their final recorded form. And certainly not Games Without Frontiers, like the internet will tell you. That's a CR78, so let's just stop that nonsense. But the song it did use the Paya on is the song Biko. So I think we should just have a quick listen. Listen out for the conga sound, which pops out in the track. So, lovely song. It's actually quite an important song, especially at the time, but definitely uses the Paya for that conga part. Now, I did a little bit of research. I took the waveforms on the recording, and you can see 3 of them there, because they're quite isolated in the recording, and they're so identical. It's obviously a machine, and it is the Paya. So, should we hear the beat again, just to remind ourselves of what that came from?
Beautiful.
It is lovely. It's lovely. Probably worth noting, it's also monophonic, isn't it? So you couldn't play 2 sounds at the same time, which I think permeates that album actually in terms of sort of linear drumming in a sense. It's definitely informed its overall sound. Cool. Okay. All right. So we've got to do the 808. You can't do a talk about the history of the drum machine, especially iconic ones, and not mention the 808, because obviously it is the most famous drum machine of all time, and even non-musicians have probably heard of it. But it does actually represent the conclusion of some of these themes that I was talking about at the start, because over a 20-year period from the Wurlitzer, we come to the 808, which is such an incredibly short amount of time. It really is remarkable. And what we've done is we've gone from valves and gone via transistors. Obviously, the 808's got transistors in, but now those transistors are packaged up in silicon chips, which enables more sophisticated programming, which is why the 808 has a sequencer that it does. We've gone from the home organist as the target market for these machines playing their bossa nova, which I know is Michael's favourite, to being able to program your own rhythms into it and generate new music styles. You're not just replicating the dance music of the day. The 808 absolutely represents that shift to let's make electronic music, let's make a feature of the sounds in that machine and see what we can do with them. And in the case of the 808, it obviously led to whole new genres that wouldn't sound the same if it wasn't for this actual device released by Roland at the time, which I think is absolutely fascinating. So, as mentioned, it's fairly ubiquitous in sort of certain aspects of music culture out there. I mean, Adidas trainers, it's ridiculous. So I'm not going to try and repeat the thousands of articles, hundreds of YouTube videos, and explanations of the 808, because I think we're sort of generally familiar, but a sort of a thumbnail sketch is that it was released in 1980. The other thing it represents is a truly professional machine. It's obviously designed for the studio. I should have mentioned this on the previous screen, because it's got its individual outputs and it's got control over the sounds, although not all of them, but you could control the sounds, and it's got DIN sync. It's obviously designed to be used in a professional context. So I think that is a major shift. And once that's happened, all other drum machines that follow that pattern really, and continue the story there. But back to the sort of thumbnail sketch of the machine itself, released in 1980, was a very sophisticated machine of the time and was, I guess, briefly popular, but unfortunately, Linn Electronics released something called the LinnDrum LM1, which contained samples of drums. And this immediately made the 808 seem outdated. It used analog synthesis to make its drum sounds, and now you've got something with samples of drums which sound like drums. And if you were a producer in a studio who wants to make something that sounds like drums, then obviously the LM1 is going to be your go-to. And it was expensive at the time, but studios and rich musicians could afford them, and they bought them. And the 808 got sort of dumped in second-hand shops and pawn shops around the world as everyone shifted to the new digital wonder machines, and obviously rendering analog drum machines obsolete overnight. In the same way, I guess, that the DX7 rendered analog synthesizers obsolete overnight when it was released in 1983. Obviously, since then, we've kind of reviewed that opinion and come to our senses, and everything is valid these days. But that's the sort of brief story of the 808. If you want more on that, I would just recommend this film. If you haven't seen it, it's brilliant. It talks about the 808 and its role in culture, which I know some people sort of react against its ubiquity, but which is absolutely fine. But there's no denying its centrality to electronic music from that point onwards. So I think we should, at this point, have a listen to the real thing, because I think we've all got samples of the 808. We might have software clones of the 808, even a hardware clone of the 808. We've heard it on records for 40 years. I think we should hear what the real thing sounds like. The real sounds made by real circuits in real time. So, Michael, do the honours.
So there it is, the 808. Like Ollie says, what can you say about this machine that hasn't already been said? Having said that,
you're going to say some stuff anyway.
We're going to repeat the same stuff. We've got 12 memories now. We've got 4 specific memories for bridges or intros. Those can be triggered automatically with a dial every 4, 8, 16 beat bars. We've got large tempo control, fine tempo control, 16 sounds now. All of them have volume, not just some of them. We've got an individual programmable accent. We can put that anywhere we want. We can accent a hi-hat now, not just a kick like we saw with the Paya. We've got individual outs. We've got DIN sync, which means you can marry it. This is pre-MIDI. It means you can marry it to the whole ecosystem of Roland gear at the time. This is a machine with the studio in mind as much as the dance hall, and that's a real revolution in this kind of machine. Now, obviously, it's programmable, and that's quite exciting. But in 1980, if you get this out of the box, you still get a bossa nova. Yes, they've programmed the bossa nova. They've programmed the samba, they've programmed the rumba up for you, because that's still important for some reason in 1980.
Who's
You've
using this
also
stuff?
you've also got a rock beat that comes as standard. We've seen that develop. And that's a good beat to maybe describe some of the other stuff that's going on. We've got individual control over so many of these sounds now. We've got decay on the cymbal and the open hi-hat. We've got tone for the cymbal. We've got tuning for the congas. We've got tuning for the toms. And over here, we've got 4 of the most crucial controls on the machine, and they're the ones that affect the bass drum and the snare. I can take the snare drum from dark all the way to bright and snappy. I can take the snappy, it's called snappy, right off, and that's like taking the snare off the bottom of a snare drum, or I can put it back on. And fundamentally the bass drum, where would the 808 be without the bass drum? That can go dark, or it can go far more attacky, and it can go from short to boomy. And that's the thing that really influences the music that this goes on to create. We can hardly forgive Roland for not knowing they were creating the future of modern dance music, but it is interesting that they still include Latin beats. But the whole point of this machine is to program it. So shall we do a bit of that?
Let's do a beat, not the bossa
Let's do a
nova.
beat. I'm using DynSync here to control the tempo. So I've got a little machine here that lets me dial in 130 beats per minute. That's Ollie's favourite. He asked me to do
True
that.
story.
So we're going to do it in 130, Ollie. I'm going to select this one here. I'm going to clear the pattern. So I make sure all the buttons are engaged in the right way. I do that. All the lights flash like Christmas. That is a blank pattern ready for programming. I'm going to use this. It's the A variation. All patterns have an A and B variation, which means you get a little bit of controllability about which part you're playing out of any pattern. They also have 2 parts, which means you're not just restricted to 16 beats. You can add another one. You can do 5/4. You can do 7/4. You can do something with 32 beats. But we're just, for time, we're just going to use the A portion of this beat. So I've got a blank beat. Probably best if I start with a bass drum.
Love it.
I'm going to start it going. I'm going to put one on there, and one on there. Now I know where the one is. So I'm going to put a snare drum on. That sounds like a beat already. How about an offbeat open hi-hats? Notice the decay on that and see what happens when we put a closed hi-hat in. It chokes it, much like the real thing. So they're going for reality as much as they can't achieve it with electronics. Wouldn't be an 808 beat without a clap, would it, Ollie?
Gotta get a
Let's
clap
put
in.
a clap on. And last but not least, certainly not least, a bit of cowbell.
Gotta be.
There you go. That sounds like a beat to me, Ollie.
It's awesome. Love it. There we go. We just invented some new genre, I think.
Over to you.
Thank you. So that's great. It's lovely to hear the real thing in the space we're in. I think it's incredible to note this was made in 1980, and here we are 45 years later, still basically extolling its virtues and reflecting its kind of cult status in modern music making still. It'd be like in 1980, getting very excited about the Troutonium from 1935, which would seem absurd, but here we are, and it still sounds great. Thanks for the demo, Michael. Now, as mentioned, the 808 found its way into second-hand shops because the LM1 had kind of taken over, but that meant it became accessible to young aspiring producers, often working in sort of underground dance music styles, especially in America, and and this is where this key theme of it becomes the foundation of a whole new way of expressing a whole new form of dance music. Essentially, we're not just replicating the bossa nova, although we are a bit in it, but we're it's the foundation of brand new music, and of course electro and this track Planet Rock was really the start of that. It burst onto the scene, a fusion of the sort of rap styles that had been fomenting on the streets of New York over the 70s. It blended sort of Afrofuturism of funk and other styles, and not to forget, blended with the European electronic scene of Kraftwerk, and really this track just copies the beat from Kraftwerk numbers. So I think we should have a quick listen to it, because it still sounds fresh 45 years later.
Just hit the phone and hit me. Just get on down and hit me. That bottom's getting so funky now, hit me. Yeah.
I mean, that is a track that is just built around the sound of the 808, and of course the 808 also lent itself to another underground form that was emerging at the time of hip-hop, and still to this day, hip-hop really is the sound of the 808, although they really like to play with the sound of the bass drum, as you may know, to use it as the bass line of tracks, and led to other styles like Miami bass and funk karaoke, all of which are basically the 808 sound, which is quite amazing. So electro lasted a couple of years, but really the track or the style that has changed global electronic music, and especially dance music, ever since is of course house music. And again, the 808 was there at the foundations of that style. And I'm going to play some considered, if not the first house track, one of the very earliest house tracks, and it's built on the 808, of course, and informed the sound of house for ever since, really. So, you know, it might sound sort of naive to our ears today maybe, but, you know, they were really taking this machine and going, what can we do with it? How can it inform the styles of music we want to hear in our clubs and our records? And so that's what they did. And of course, since then, it's just informed all genres of electronic music ever since. I was going to play like a 3-minute medley of all this, but I just don't have time. I mean, some of these songs are really well known, some are more underground, but it's just permeated its way as a sort of lingua franca of electronic music ever since, and almost you can decide to be for it or against it, but it is definitely there. So an absolutely fascinating machine. I'll just let my little slideshow finish up there. So that's all cool. That's the sort of cultural aspect of the 808. It really completes that story of like these machines are now forming the basis of new styles that wouldn't have been possible beforehand. I'm sure we all find that really exciting. That's why we're here celebrating synthesizers and electronic instruments in general. So I'm just going to finish this section on the 808 by, that's all great, and some of that is quite well known, but how many people know how the 808 actually makes its sounds? So we'll have a little look at that, because it's quite interesting. Roland were kind enough in their service manuals to print the entire circuit diagram, which is very thoughtful of them, because when you come back years later and go, okay, we could clone this, except for the sequencer using its microchips a bit, but it's absolutely fascinating to look at how they actually did it. Now, for this section, I just want to give a shout out to this YouTube channel, a guy called Astro Bear Music, 1977. On some of his videos, he's done the hard work of reverse engineering the actual circuits of the 808 to determine the frequencies that some of the oscillators actually run at, and how the pulse triggers triggered oscillators and this kind of stuff. So I just wanted to make it clear that I've lent heavily on his work here, and big props to him. Do check out his videos, they're cool. So let's make some sounds of the 808. We're going to make the bass drum, we're going to make the snare drum, we're going to make the clap, hi-hats, and cowbell. Of course, the cowbell. So the interesting thing about the bass drum circuit is that, I know you'd be pleased about that one. The interesting thing about the bass drum circuit is that it doesn't use a standard oscillator that would just generate a continuous pulse wave. It uses something called a bridge T network oscillator, which is more like a ringing filter circuit that you kick with a pulse wave, and then it rings out at a certain frequency determined by the capacitor and resistors in the circuit. And because it naturally rings out, you don't need all the sort of other synth componentry of voltage-controlled envelopes and VCAs and all that kind of stuff. It simplifies it, and you can actually control the length of the decay by adjusting the amount of feedback on the circuit, so you kind of got a built-in decay control. And actually, what we forgot to mention was that the Paya does a very similar thing. A lot of its circuits are these resonant circuits that are much simpler ways of generating electronic sounds. So that's cool. What we're going to do, we're going to pop over to a very neat program called Phase Plant that some of you may know about, and I might have to put my glasses on for this. And we're going to look at how the bass drum is made in the 808. So what we're going to start with is a horrible sound. That's our trigger pulse. It's just a pulse wave. Obviously, we don't want a great long pulse wave, so we're going to shorten it so we get our trigger click. There we go, you can just about hear that. Now we need to feed that. You can see on the middle panel, it's feeding a couple of filters, which will be our resonance circuit. There's no resonance on it at the moment, so we need to increase the resonance in that filter circuit. There we go, we've got a sort of chirruping filter now, but it's obviously too high. That's not a kick drum. So we need to drop the pitch down to something a bit more bass-like. We're getting there. I mean, that's sounding quite nice already, actually. But the magic source of the 808's kick drum is the pitch envelope that generates your front transient and drop. So if we increase, watch the filter, it will start going, jumping about as it drops on each trigger. And that is how you make an 808 kick drum, and it still sounds great. As Michael mentioned, you've got the filter control, which is just the tone control, which is just a simple filter, so we can just filter it like that. But that is the kick drum of the 808. So that's great, we like that. Let's make a snare drum. So this has 2 oscillators, and they are tuned at 250 hertz and 500 hertz. The 250 hertz upper oscillator is the one that you control when you do the tone control of the 808 snare. It adjusts the volume of it, and you layer some white noise on because that's a very accurate recreation of wires under a snare drum. And altering the volume of it accurately mimics the distance of the wires from the bottom head of the snare. That's exactly what's going on there. So let's have a go at making that. So we'll close our bass drum, and we will go to our snare. So we'll start with our trigger. What we need to do first is to introduce some white noise. So let's do that. That's lovely. It's already quite a short envelope. It's a bit too bold, so we need to filter it. A lot of this stuff, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is about how you filter a sound afterwards. So if we take out some of the low frequencies, we have a much more realistic, or at least 808 realistic sound. We shall do a little bit of low-pass filtering. Now, what we also need is the oscillators. So I need to load up Snap Peep, which is confusing me briefly. There it is. So we're going to switch on our 500 hertz oscillator. I can get to do it. Why aren't you doing that? Oh, look at that, demo-itis. Don't you love it? There we go. 500 hertz and 200 hertz. And of course you can alter the volume of the 200 hertz. And that's a sort of passable 808 snare. That is how they made that one. So let's now have a look at the clap circuit. Now, it's great. Roland, so helpful. They've drawn a diagram of exactly how you make the sound of an analog clap. You have 4 bursts of white noise over 30 milliseconds with a small amount of white noise over the top for a kind of ambience, which I've drawn in a very sort of basic way here for you. So let's make that. So here we go. We'll close our snare drum, which I'll load up the claps. Phase Plant, by the way, is a great modular synth component program, which I can highly recommend, and I wasn't paid to say that. So we're going to start with white noise. A clap starts with white noise. We need to reduce the envelope so it's very, very short. Remember, we've got to fit 4 of these in 30 milliseconds. So we'll make it really, really short. Then we're going to increase the number of repeats that we have. So we've got 1, probably 2 there. Get up to about 4 there. And then again, as ever, applying a bit of filtering. Oh, sorry, I didn't add my white noise for the ambience. There we go. We'll just add that over the top. If I put it in too loud, you'll hear it's there. And then you, like good reverb practice, you take it down so you can't quite hear it, but would notice if it was missing. And then we'll do our filtering. You kind of got your 808 clap sound there. So, what are we going to do next? We're going to look at Oh God, metal instruments. So it's fine. We've been able to do white noise, clap emulations, and the kick drum with its swooping sine wave work okay. But of course, the trouble with analog synthesizers or analog oscillators is that they generally produce whole number ratios. They're very nice. The sawtooth, the square wave, they're very pleasing sounds. And of course, a sawtooth lends itself to emulating the sound of a string because they have very similar harmonics. So that's fine. That's why we like the sound of strings in analog synthesizers. But metallic resonating objects are horrific. They're atonal partials. They are dynamic. They change. They change very quickly over time, and you just can't model them accurately in analog synthesis. Of course, you can make a load of splashy white noise in analog synthesizers by use of analog frequency modulation or ring modulation or amplitude modulation, all these sorts of things. Roland didn't do any of those, although it's worth noting the Korg KR55 did cross-modulate pairs of pulse wave oscillators to create that effect, and some might prefer the sound of those or may feel they were slightly more well-rounded sounds. But Roland didn't do that. No, they have six pulse wave oscillators tuned to these frequencies, and this is where I must refer back to Astro Bear, who reverse engineered the actual circuits to determine what frequencies the circuit of an 808 hat should actually be, and it's this random collection of frequencies, which basically gives you a mess of overtones, from which you can then derive a kind of hi-hat sound. So let's do that. So what we're going to do, we will start with our bass, maybe we could a bit more volume on that, it seems a bit quiet. There we go. So that's our bass frequency. We're going to add in the 5 other atonally tuned pulse waves. So it's a messy sound, no doubt, but of course the magic is in the filtering. Take out the low frequencies, and you get something that's not dissimilar to an 808, perhaps more 606 in this case. I'm going to give myself the liberty of adding liberal amounts of distortion because analog circuits, and then a little bit more high-pass filtering. And you've kind of got something akin to the 808 hat, so that's how the 808 hat circuit works. And finally, and not leastly, everyone's favourite, the cowbell. Now this just uses 2 of the 6 oscillators. They've been very efficient, Roland here. They haven't created 2 more oscillators. They've just siphoned off the hi-hats, crash, and cymbals one. And so, sorry, I've done the wrong button there. We'll go to this little thing. We'll make ourselves a lovely cowbell. It's actually trickier than it sounds, I have to say. I've found it quite hard to really get the exact 808 nuance, but we'll do it anyway. So we're going to start with our first pulse there, and we're going to add in our second one. Clearly that's too long, so we need to shorten the envelope. So let's make it a bit shorter. And already we're definitely in the world of 808 cowbell. We'll do a little bit more filtering, which is always where the real magic happens, and a bit of distortion as well, just for good measure. And we've made ourselves an 808 cowbell. There you go. Who knew it could be so simple? But I think it's a testament to the engineers of the 808 that they came up with this stuff, without the benefit of software modeling, which we could only do with, transistors and silicon chips that came much later. So props to them. So, oh yes, what we needed to do, sorry, I forgot. The important bit is, I've made a beat with my 808. That's quite cool. So that's what I've just made, and now going to put my synthesizing chops to the test. Michael, you know that beat you played, you programmed in just there?
Yours is going to sound better.
We've not done this though. Just make it louder and it'll be fine. Nice.
I'm going to put an accent on mine.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Great. I immediately noticed my cowbell was differently tuned, but there we go. This is the first time we've done a real run through in real life, so that's great. Thanks, Michael. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the talk now, because I think what we've done, we've gone on our journey from presets to programmability, from the home organist, bless them, to the professional musician in their studio. We've gone from repeating sort of previous dance music rhythms to being the catalyst of brand new styles of music that simply weren't possible before. And from this point, from the Linn LM1 that we were talking about that displaced the 808 initially, pretty much anything became possible. The whole sequence of sample-based drum machines came in after that throughout the early 80s, and when technology enabled it, you could then sample into your drum machines and put your own sounds in. Akai came up with the music production systems built on the Linn 9000, which was a sampling drum machine that bankrupted Linn, ironically, having sort of displaced the 808. And then ultimately, you can do software modeling with really sophisticated technology and recreate the sound of vintage circuits in software, which we just did. Cool. And then you could even physically model acoustic drums, which is really hard. I had a slide about all the modalities of concave resonating membranes and God knows what. It's really complicated stuff, and you can now do this with the technology we have today, which is extraordinary. So I think the drum machine has put itself in the heart of modern music making. The technology has enabled that, and we're here at SynthFest sort of reaping the benefits of all this innovation from 65 years ago, where people were doing their best to create something with the tools they had to hand, and did a great job. But nowadays we can do pretty much anything. So I urge you to go upstairs, buy all the stuff, and make loads of brilliant music with all the drum machines and synthesizers available there. Thank you very much, and thanks to Michael.
Thank you. Nice one, mate.
Cheers.